See, I unmuted myself. Now you can hear me.
I can. Wow, you got a beautiful space there. I like your
Oh,
mic.
yeah, you like my mic. You like my mic. Well, I'm going to try and use that today, and then we'll see. But usually computer audio does it well. And so basically how this is going to work is by the way, I'm going to mention the fabulous interview you gave me as to open up the show, but I'm going to ask you your sister's story and then why you became the fabulous advocate you are for the disabled. And then I'm going to introduce you and have you read your bio, even though your bio will be in my show notes, just because I tend to screw up on people's bios. So yeah, it's easier if I chat with you. That's a whole nother. So I'm just going to stop my video here because it's easier on the podcast end, just because, you know, as podcasters, we want the best audio quality.
You got it. And one thing I just wanted to mention, and I should turn my video off too.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, there we go.
So when I tell my sister's story, it is through my lens. So It's typically a story where it's told kind of in conjunction with my story because that's how I live. Like that's the story to me, right? Like it's very interconnected.
Oh, yes.
So is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's okay with me.
Okay, perfect.
And so I'm just going to pause this thing and actually it's recording right now so we can go. I'll just leave what you just said at the beginning of it and we can just go into it.
Sure.
Welcome to Butterflies of Wisdom, everyone. If you guys hear a little bit of better audio quality, that's because we are using Skype. And I say we because I have a very interesting disabled advocate with me. His name is Eric. And by the way, I just did a podcast interview for his podcast, the Empowering Abilities podcast. Hint, hint, speaking of the disabled, but that won't be out until July. So unfortunately, you guys get to hear his story before you hear mine on his podcast, but his podcast could be found on Stitcher, could be found on iTunes, could be found everywhere. So without further ado, I'm going to let Mr. Eric take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Wynn, for having me on the podcast. And it was a pleasure interviewing you on the Empowering Ability podcast. And what might happen, I might release your podcast or our podcast together a little bit earlier on my show, just with how scheduling's lined up. So I'll let you know so you can let your listeners know when that's going to come out.
And would you please explain to my fan base on how you got into this wonderful life of being a disabled advocate? I almost called it a mess, but it's really not a mess.
Yeah, it depends on the perspective you look at it from.
It does. It does. It depends on the perspective of it all.
Yeah. So I would love to. So when my sister has a disability, so she has a developmental disability. She was born with it, and it impacts her mobility, and it impacts her like learning capability as well. But so she was born with it. She's my older sister. She's 3 years older than I am, and you know, for me, it was just growing up with a sister that had a disability. It was just normal. It was life. I didn't know any different because I was the younger brother. And, as we grew up, I fought with my sister. I loved and hugged and kissed my sister. We played games together. We had like a typical sibling relationship, like any other siblings would have. And we grew up just outside of Toronto in Canada. And there's one distinct moment that I remember when I noticed something was a little different about my family. So I was probably about 8 years old at the time, my sister around 10 or 11. And we're in the shopping mall with my mom. And my mom would always take us, get clothes or grocery shopping, whatever. My mom played the role of a stay-at-home mom to help provide the care that my sister needed. So anyways, so I'm pushing my sister in the mall. And she has this stroller. And at the time, she didn't have a wheelchair. It was just, like a stroller, like a little kid would be in.
Yeah.
And I remember pushing her stroller and all the other kids staring at us. And and I started to realize that, okay, well, all these kids are staring at us. Why are they staring at us? And it finally, clicked in with me. Not everybody has a sister that has a disability, and seeing a big kid in a stroller is not typical. And, and at the same time, I was super defensive of my sister. So I was sticking my tongue out at the other kids or giving them, dirty looks. And they were just, more than likely curious, right? Why is this big kid in a stroller? And really from that point, it helped me to see that the world saw Sarah a little differently. And from that point on, it was kind of ingrained into me to be an advocate for my sister. And over time, it grew into being an advocate for other people that have a disability. I grew up with a few really good close friends that had a disability, and I've always tried to influence other people to befriend people with a disability. I had the great opportunity to have a very short conversation with Jean Vanier, who started L'Arche, and that was a big message from Jean, is to always be a good friend to people with a disability and to influence others. To be friends with them as well. So that's a powerful message with me. But so now what I do is really advocate for all people with a disability. So as you mentioned, when I've got the podcast, the Empowering Ability podcast, where really the main purpose of why I do it is to help people and families with a disability to create incredible, ordinary lives. And the reason that I chose that language is because a lot of the people with the disability that I've worked with or that I'm friends with, they just want to live a life like anybody else.
Like a normal life.
Exactly. And so through the podcast, I have on great guests like yourself to share their thoughts and perspectives to help people live those, ordinary lives, as well as, people who have vast experience in a disability sector. And as well, I'm a professional coach. So I'm just completing my certification as a life coach, and I coach families and individuals that have disabilities to help them achieve the incredible ordinary life they want and the goals that they have for themselves. So that's really about me and then my sister. I've been very close with her in her life in the last 2 years, helping her plan her ordinary life. So a big thing that we're working on now is helping her get engaged in the community that she wants to be more engaged in, and exploring her interests, which has been awesome to watch and see her grow. And the big thing we're working on right now is helping her to get her own home and to help her create that. So
that's a challenge that I have right there. That's a challenge that I have right there. Now, I still live with my dad, and as we do this interview, sitting in my office, he's upstairs, but I still live with my dad because, one, I feel like it's best for my situation. Two, where I live, I couldn't afford to live on my own. I mean, where I live in one of the most popular resort towns in Colorado, Aspen, Colorado, and I still have able-bodied friends that live with their parents because of the housing up here. And so having a disability and finding housing and using the system is tough enough as it is.
For sure. For sure. And and it's no different in Canada. I'm currently recording a 6-part mini-series on housing for people with a disability. And it's interesting to start to explore the problem. I mean, here where I live in the province of Ontario in Canada, there's about, I think it's 19,000 people that are in government-funded housing with a disability, and they give support services and all that as well. But there's another 10,000 people on a wait list to have access to those services. So it's a big need, right? It's a big need. So one of the things that I'm exploring is what are the other solutions that are out there, and what does it look like for people with a disability to create their own solutions?
Yeah. Exactly. No, my dad and I talked about getting a tiny home on our property for when he can't do it anymore. And so I thought that was a little me. Of course, I wouldn't be living in a tiny home. That would be for AIDS. But but it's interesting because, as I said on your podcast, I was just dealing with voc rehab here in Colorado, and I don't know what they call voc rehab up in Canada, but they said to me, and now granted, I'm only looking for a system of devices to read, to go back to school, to get straight A's on my homework. But they said to me, the woman at Vogue Rehab said to me, we can't get you in until June 27th to start the initial conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, thank God I'm not looking for a job coach.
Right. Well, maybe you and I should talk if you're looking for a job coach.
Yeah. No, seriously. I have a job. And my family knows that by now. But seriously, I'm thinking that the system is going downhill. And this is not one of my typical podcast questions, but how can we make the system better for the disabled, both in Canada and the U.S.?
Wow, that's a big question, and it's not an easy one to solve or to implement. But I think there needs to be more conversation and a bigger voice from people that have a disability and their families at the table or in positions of power within the government, or that can influence strong influences to the government, to have a voice, to have the input, to collectively share from the disability community what works, what doesn't work, what we need, what we don't need. And I think that's a big part of it. And I think the other part of it is this whole the disability movement that we're a part of, that we need to adopt a mindset where people and families with a disability don't view themselves as victims. We don't view ourselves as, having our hands out to, I need this, or I can't do this for myself. It's taking a mindset of being a creator and the world being an abundant place and holding ourselves capable to creating our own solutions. So I think if we're able to do those two things, then the world becomes a much different place.
I agree with you, and my fan base knows this by now. Don't have a pity party in front of me. You can have a I'm sorry party. You can grab the Kleenex box to cry happy tears as you're listening to this podcast or any of my podcasts, but please don't have a woe is me party for the disabled, because the woe is me party doesn't help the family, doesn't help the disabled, and that's all I'll say about that. I'll get off my mini soapbox.
Yeah, I agree. And if you're gonna have that pity party, have it in front of me, alone, and then we're gonna talk about how you're gonna move forward.
Yeah, have it in front of me alone, and then we're going to talk about how we're going to move forward. Also, if you're in the U.S., I'm happy to do that via Zoom or via Skype. Seriously, take me up on your offer. But then we're going to talk about how you, as the disabled individual, should move forward. And now, Eric, is your sister working with a job coach, if you don't mind me asking?
So if I were to ask my sister that question, I think she would say that I'm her coach. So we've got a really tight relationship, Wynn, and she'll tell other people that I'm her mentor, and she looks up to me and her coach and stuff like that. So it's pretty special in that way.
Yes, so she's not working with the typical job coaches. And by the way, you guys, if you want a podcast to listen to, one episode out of Eric's episode, go listen to the disabled employment episode. Oh my God, who you got was fantastic. I actually contacted that woman to be on my podcast because I want to ask her more about employment. Oh my God, she was a wealth of knowledge, and I forget her name at this point. But
Laura McKean.
But my God, she just said, this is what employers should do. This is what the disabled should do. I'm happy that my employer is an equal opportunity employer. I actually kind of made them an equal opportunity employer because I was lucky enough to go to that school as a student, so they know who I am. They know what my gifts are. But it's really hard to find equal opportunity employers, and I'm noticing on job applications as I fill out freelance job applications to be a fashion journalist after I get my degree. I'm noticing asking, do you have a disability? And yes, cerebral palsy is on the list, thank God. And I always say yes, I do have a disability, and then I can talk to you guys about that once the interview process begins. But at least employers are asking, do you have a disability?
Yeah, in Canada, it's up to the person applying to the job to disclose if they have a disability, and that's the option on the person applying. There's a big benefit to disclosing that you do have a disability and partnering with the employer on any accessibility things that like needs that you might have, because if the employer is helping you with the accessibility aspect of the job, then you're going to be much more efficient and much more successful and get better results for that employer in the job, right?
I was just about to say that. And give a disabled person a job, they do it 110%. So I want you guys, and Eric will probably agree with me, I want you guys again to call your local rehab, call your job coaches, and say, I want to hire a person with a disability. You can either hire me to help you with your podcasting too. And once you give a disabled person a job, they will do it 110%. Jeez.
Yeah, and like some of the stats around people with a disability as employees, they're much more loyal.
Yeah.
Right. Like they're not going to jump ship nearly as quickly. They and that might be a bit of a myth too, right? Like some employers might think, well, this person has a disability, they're gonna have more medical appointments or whatever that employer may perceive. But the stats show is that people with disability are much more loyal employees, and it often doesn't cost nearly as much to accommodate somebody. In Canada, the average accommodation cost is around $500. So it's not that much for for an accommodation. And like you were alluding to, when the disabled community has a massive untapped potential of talent that employers are missing out on. So for if there's any employers listening to this, start thinking about you tapping into that potential and the results and the success and the money that business can make. And also, I mean, it can also change the culture of your company.
Yes, it can also change the culture of your company. I mean, I'm lucky that not only does my day job support the podcast, they not only support the podcast, they support me as a whole. They support equal opportunity employment, and they I'm the only one teaching diversity, let alone teaching on a walk-up there, and that is Aspen Country Day, and I know they have country days up in Canada too. And so look at you guys when you're thinking about hiring an assistant, and look at the disabled population for their gifts and talents, not necessarily for their disabilities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
And so, Eric, what is your favorite podcast, if you have one?
My favorite podcast. So there's a couple that I listen to pretty frequently. One is the Tim Ferriss Show. So a lot of people have probably heard of that, but all about really kind of life hacking type stuff. And he is one of the biggest podcasts as well. So good guy to learn from as a podcaster. So that's one of them. And then the other one that I listen to about entrepreneurship is called EntreLeadership. And it's by, I forget the host name, but it's under Dave Ramsey's leadership. So those are probably the two that I listen to most frequently around kind of business, leadership, and building a business.
And so, entrepreneurship, you're not necessarily talking about John Lee Dumas, E.O. Fire. You're talking about the more of the obscure entrepreneurship.
Yeah, so like when I talk about entrepreneurship, I'm talking about like I'm not talking about building a tech startup or something like that. It's really around what's the best way to build a business or a nonprofit or what. There's many different types of businesses, right? So that's just an interest of mine, and I'm myself building building a business with empowering ability, right? And the podcast and coaching, and I'm currently writing an ebook. All that kind of ties into it. So that's what I'm talking about with entrepreneurship.
And so your main focus is on helping the disabled. My main focus is helping entrepreneurs and teachers and educating people about disabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so what is your favorite book, if you have one? And it doesn't have to be a business book per se. It just has to be a book that you go back to time and time again.
Yeah, I love that question. So favorite book is The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma.
I have heard of that.
Yeah,
We
so
actually have heard of that.
It's so Robin Sharma is a Toronto guy. That's not why I love it so much, but it was a book that was I read at a turning point in my life, which really helped me to seek what my purpose was, and to really start to dive into who I am as a person, and really help me go down the path of serving the world and helping and partnering with people that have a disability to create incredible ordinary lives.
Well, that's amazing. Now, where can people find you, and where can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, thanks, Wynn. So you can check out the Empowering Ability website at www.empoweringability.org, and you can connect with the podcast, the Empowering Ability podcast there, and some other great resources. As I mentioned, right now, currently doing a mini series on housing and creating your home. And I've got a great worksheet on there. So check me out there. Podcast is on iTunes and Stitcher and all those great places. You should be able to find it on whatever podcast app that you use, also on the website. And you can email me at Eric, that's with a C, Goll, GOLL, .com.
And just a quick programming announcement, you guys. This podcast will go out on Thursday, be live on Thursday, because you guys love me so much that I think you guys need an extra day of me. You guys need an extra day of motivation, and of course, people are starting to find me and come calling to me to be interviewed by me. 9 times out of 10, I'm honored to be interviewed by you about anything. And so before I let Eric go, I'm going to have Eric ask me 4 questions that he's been interested in asking me about cerebral palsy, about podcasting, about job coaching, about anything.
Awesome. Thanks for the opportunity, Wynn. Let's first go to the favorite book question.
The favorite book question. I would say Three Cups of Tea by Greg Montenson. And that book is about building schools in Pakistan and how Greg Montenson did it. And I know it's on audio tape, you guys, so you guys can listen to it. I'm more of a podcast junkie than I am book junkie. I need to get a subscription to Audible and download books. I need to open up my Kindle actually again and quit downloading college textbooks.
Okay, so yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And I asked you this question on my podcast, Wynn, and I think it's a super powerful message and a question to ask. So could you share who your biggest mentor, your biggest mentor, one or two of them is, and why?
Well, my biggest mentor, as I explained on your podcast, my biggest mentor happens to be my parents and my soon-to-be stepmom, believe it or not, because when my soon-to-be stepmom came in my life, she had never interacted with a disabled person yet, so she has quickly learned how to interact with a disabled person, and so has a daughter. So I must be doing something right. Be able to teach my soon-to-be stepmom about disability.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay. So I have one more question.
You have two more questions.
I have two more questions. Okay. In what are the positive ways that disability has impacted or changed the world?
Well, not in my life, or what I have seen about disabilities in general changing the world.
Yeah, in general.
In general, I watched interesting documentary yesterday of John F. Kennedy. And for those of you who do not know, John F. Kennedy had a daughter named Rosemary, and she had a lobotomy, which they don't do anymore, thank God. And so I think this, what's the word I'm looking for? The sight unseen common knowledge about disabilities has now come out of the woodwork, slowly but surely, with the work we're doing and with the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so my next question kind of tails along with this, with your answer. How can your audience support the movement for people with a disability to live ordinary lives?
Well, one, they can also subscribe to this podcast or grab people's phones and then subscribe them to this podcast. So now my work gets even out there further. And two, they can, as I said, call your voc rehab and call your local job coach and say, can I help you by hiring a person with a disability? I can give them a job as my assistant, or I can give them a job as working on social media for my company. So please, 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 please look out to your voc rehab, both in Canada or wherever you may be listening to this podcast.
Awesome. Well, I think those are my 4 questions. Wynn, do you want me to keep going?
You get one more, and I usually don't give the option of one more, but because we've had such a fascinating conversation on disabilities twice now, I think you get the honor of giving me 5 questions because you are so fascinating to speak on disabilities.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm honored. Now I got to think of the question I should have thought about what the question was going to be before I
That's okay.
asked for another one. What's the most important lesson someone else with a disability has taught you?
Someone else with a disability. Well, 2 weeks after my book came out, my BFF, who's my assistant, who you've been dealing with, her name is Danielle Coulter, and the reason why
great.
I made her my assistant, one, she does 110% of the job. She's so good, and then I'm like, you're so good. 2, she wants to help her BFF, and that's not my point. My point of this story is she's taught me never, ever, 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 ever to give up, because 2 weeks after my book came out, she says, well, I'm going to write a book about me having cerebral palsy. And I said, okay, but you can't speak. You got the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck, and that's public knowledge, so she doesn't mind me sharing that story. So she can't use Siri to write books. And I'm like, okay, how are you going to write this book if you can't speak? Well, unbeknownst to me, it took a good year. Do you know she wrote a good 20-chapter book, and it's called If Dan Can Shred, You Can Do It Too. Or you guys can type in Danielle Coulter on Amazon, amazon.ca or amazon.us, and her books will pop up as well. But she's taught me never, ever, ever to give up. Once you put your mind to something, you can do it.
I love it. I love that message. Thank you.
Thank you. No, and thank you guys for putting up with me for one more day. And if you don't like Thursdays, just let me know. And if you want to be on my podcast or Eric's podcast, just reach out to myself, Danielle. And Eric does a little bit differently. He doesn't have a scheduling system per se, but if you want to be on Eric's podcast, just email him or go to the Abilities website and then contact them. Or how can people be on your podcast if they are advocate for the disabled or have a disability themselves? Mental, physical, and I think you deal with emotional, don't you, Eric?
Yeah, so just a quick point around disability. I try not to define it by a diagnosis.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I treat people as people and help them move forward with a path that they, either want some help to create or help to implement. So it's just a side note on kind of how I think about it. But I'd be, if people are interested in coming on the podcast, go to empoweringability.org, and you can just fill out the contact information at the bottom of the website there, or you can send me an email at eric@ericgoll.com.
And you guys, this is a great podcast to listen to, even if you don't have a disability, but you're like, I need to learn about disabilities from Win or a different perspective. I need to get the disabled involved in my life. So this is a great podcast to listen to. And of course, I'm a big fan of Eric, and of course, now he's a big fan of mine. And so if you guys want to reach out to me, by all means, reach out to me. And this podcast has been sponsored by Kitter, Kitter. And what Kitter does is they compose a tweet, or you can compose a tweet on Twitter. But the cool thing is they put the trending hashtag with it. And Eric, what social media platform do you hang out on the most?
Yeah, probably Facebook. So you can find me there at Empowering Ability. So just type in Empowering Ability on Facebook, and we'll come up.
Well, thank you, Eric, and thank you for interviewing me. I hope both fan bases get a wide perspective on what it's like being bothered to a disabled person or living with a disability. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks, Wayne.